mention that at all. You know, that it was just a very a big learning experience to see that.
It's very calculated to happen like that. I mean, it was a shame because certainly when King split up here, I felt we lost something. And it was almost like, you know, child dying. It seemed like a lot of life left. It was too early. There was a lot more. There was at least another album. I thought. Was there any material ever left? I doubt it.
Well, me and Paul wrote all the songs that were going to be King's third album.
Oh right.
And a lot of
were they the ones you got to put on disc and let me out? Possibly.
Do you know?
You don't know where they are?
No, I don't. There was one called Skin, which was great. I still remember that being a great song. And I don't have a recording of that at all.
Oh, what a shame. So you've got another one?
No.
So there is a missing album?
No.
The album is
I'll find it.
Yeah, he will find it.
Not so, go for it, yeah.
That's fascinating, yeah. Never thought about that. So was there many songs?
There must have been probably 7 or 8 at least, so there was practically a whole album's worth. A couple of them ended up on Paul's solo album.
Joy, was it?
Yeah, Joy. I'm really sorry that didn't do better, because I could have done with the PRS, but you know, I think what happened was Paul, sorry I'm jumping ahead here,
no, at all.
Paul went to America to record that, so he recorded it with all the Epic people, which was the American bit of CBS, and then brought it back to Britain, who then said, why did you go to America, you know, what did you do that for? And so they never really got behind him when he got back. They felt sort of a bit kind of betrayed, I think.
Yeah.
But perhaps, I don't know.
So, sort of carrying on really with the story, but bringing it up to date at the same time. And I think we've talked about this earlier on before we started, but I'll ask you the question again. Do you see Jim, Tony and Paul?
I haven't seen Paul for a good few years now. It's got to be 7, no, longer than that. Probably more than 10 years, I would think. But we've spoken on phone and emailed and stuff, and Jan here, my wife, teaching at a primary school, they were getting a charity cookbook together, and Paul sent the recipe up for it with him. So, you know, he's still around and very friendly, and
you know what the next question is, don't you? Where we're heading on this one. Everybody knows the question I'm going to ask. Will we ever see a King reunion?
We tried last year. I tried to make it happen last year, but with the express intention of doing some festivals. And with me and Jim and Tony and even Adrian, the drummer who was with us for the vast majority of the time, we're all here. We all got together and talked about it and said, wouldn't it be great? And we got hold of Paul and said, you know, what do you reckon? And he said, let me think about it. So he said, all right, I put the phone out. Oh, yes, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. All the rest of us are here. All we need is Paul. He's going to do it. And he left us for a fortnight. He didn't ring us back for 2 weeks, by which time we were all, it was on the phone rang. No, it wasn't. And eventually got back to us and said, no. He said, it's all right for you guys. You've all still been playing and stuff. He said, well, I haven't been on stage, you know, since King split up, really. So, you know, having to stand there and kick his legs about and all the rest of it and do all that. He said, oh, I can't do that again.
Do you think people would expect him to actually do that, or just be a little bit more laid back, more mature version of King? You know?
Well,
I mean, everybody grows up, for heaven's sake, you know. So
speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, of course. But, I think also he's put a lot of time and effort into becoming a TV producer. And building up some credibility with that, and to kind of put that to one side and go and whether he kicked his legs about or not, actually appear on stage with an old pop group, if you like, again. I think that actually was his
I get that kind of feeling, really.
Yeah.
And before we move off King, Colin and John, the drummers,
bless them.
the Pete Best syndromes that happened twice for King.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that? I know these guys are still quite upset after all these years about being kicked out of the band.
Well, Colin Haynes was the Colin Kolosnik.
Yeah, of course. So he was with you right at the beginning.
For years, we were like friends from when I was, you know, from school days, really. So yeah, Colin went. When Raw Screens, as it was, first got together and said, look, we're really going to push for this. We're really going to try hard and make this happen. Colin started a carpentry apprenticeship which wasn't a problem. Obviously, you know, he's hedging his bets. But as that went on, he started taking on more and more carpentry work, and not turning up for rehearsals and stuff like that. So he was kind of the architect of his own downfall there, really. So much as he was my mate, I used to ring him up and say, "You've got to really turn up, you know, you can't say you're a member of the band and not be there." You know, but he went off and did his own thing, really, and eventually Paul said, "Look, this is ridiculous, you know, we can't move forward with this guy." And that was it. So Cole was out.
John Hewitt.
John Hewitt, Stonky, he was great. He had a purple three-wheeler, a purple like Robin Reliant, that had, you haven't heard the worst yet, green fun fur interior. It was like,
your eyes water.
It was a migraine on three wheels, that's what it was. Astonishing, but he could fit his old drum kit in there with like a rack of 6 concert toms in it, and you know, astonishing. It all fitted. There wasn't a micron left in this thing when he had his drum kit in it. And Stonky was great. He's the only person I've ever known knock himself out with a football. We were playing at the Lanch. No, not the Lanch. Sorry, Warwick University, and the bit around Ellie's Nest kind of stages right down, and it goes up about 4 or 5 floors. You go to all the way to the roof, and we were kicking a football about with a centre PA up, and he went to drop kick this football, threw everything he had at it, and it came off his toe and hit him on the forehead like that, knocked himself off his feet backwards and just lay there on the floor, completely knocked out. But yeah, he was great, Stonky, and we felt so bad about this. The only reason John didn't stay with King all the way through was because he couldn't play to a click. When you're in a recording studio, especially at that time in the 80s, people started making 12-inch mixes of everything, which meant the producer would take a bit from the beginning, or a bit from the end, or a bit from the middle, and put them all together. And if they weren't all the same tempo, if it was faster at the end than the beginning, you couldn't do it. So that was it. When we recorded Love and Pride, it was John that played drums on Love and Pride down in the studio. But the 2-inch master tape on the big Atari machines at the time, it looked like someone had taken a pair of scissors to it and put it all together with gaffer tape, which is essentially what happened, to try and get the bass drums exactly equal. You know what I mean? You had to cut the tape and edit it all together to get one tape that we could use. So it was a producer in the end that said, look, you don't have enough money to make an album with this drummer. You know, whether you want to keep him for live, you've got to get a new drummer to record with, because it's going to take too long. You know, you haven't got the money for the studio time. So that was it. But we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know that conversation had gone on. We had to go off then and do a photo shoot for the single and the upcoming album cover. So we'd all been bought new clothes, so we turned up at this photo studio, and John's got this hat with a huge great beak on it. To this day I feel bad about that. But you know, it's all, you know, put your chin up, Wiki, and turn around like that, head down, John. So,
well, yeah.
So all the things we saw, you couldn't see his face. You know what I mean?
And that was done because they knew.
Because we didn't know at the time, but the management knew. You know that he wasn't gonna do it. So that was it. So Stonky, bless him, yeah.
Right. So King have gone.
Yeah.
Split up.
Okay.
So I've got to hear you went on to do a lot of work. Was it Planet Studios? And didn't you play on that album as well, the Dave Willits? I think you're credited on there, are you?
Yeah, I produced that.
I hope so. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, there we are.
Yeah. That was a strange experience. That was. The whole thing was done with a guy that didn't have very much money. Do you know Dutch van Spaan?
Oh, I know of him. Right. I don't know him.
Well, it was done at his studio.
I know him, yeah.
And Dave records with the BBC Symphony Orchestras and things like that usually. Can't afford that, this guy who's putting this album together, so he gets me and 2 Atari samplers and says, can you do an album with this guy? So that was it. I spent, I don't know how many months in a studio knocking together these backing tracks and stuff, trying to make these 2 Ataris that were great at the time, but so that's a dodgy album. That if you want some dodgy.
I quite like it. I think it's quite a good album, actually. No, I'm not saying I do. I honestly like that album.
Really?
There's some good tracks on it. There's one, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a really emotive track. And I just think it's wonderful. In fact, we had to do something for the Godiva Awards, and we picked one of those, you know, when people went up to collect their awards, and one on that track was used. But anyway, I digress.